Well, at least we're on to the good stuff now. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is James, and today I'm going to be giving you my top 10 favorite movies of 2023. Now, 2023 has been a very interesting year, as I've stated already in my previous videos, most disappointing, most surprising, and worst movies of the year, where this has been a year that has been very strange. A lot of movies were very disappointing. There were a few hidden gems, but by the end, to be honest with you, the first half of the year was pretty terrible. It felt like there were only a few that I genuinely loved. Creed 3, a couple others. But within the first 6 months of the year, there weren't too many. And then it felt as we started to get towards the end of June and more into July, more movies started to pop up that I really enjoyed. And so I thought I'd take this time to give you my favorite movies of the year. This is just my opinion, like all my videos. I'm not objectively right. There will be movies on this list that you will completely disagree with. I can guarantee you that. My opinion, please let me know your favorite movies down below in the comments. And with all that said, let's get started. Before we start, I do want to give you some honorable mentions for my top 10 of the year. I'll be giving you 5. There were about 6 or 7 that I could have given, but I want to keep it short. I want to keep this concise. And so these are movies that I really enjoyed, but they didn't quite make it to the cut of the top 10. Honorable mention that I have is Godzilla Minus One. This is a movie that could very much move up into my top 10. And to be honest with you, apart from one scene that kind of tainted a bit, it would have been in my top 10 of the year. I genuinely love most of this movie. It's the best Godzilla movie I've ever seen. It's an absolute triumph. It shows what you can do with $15 million. It is an absolute triumph. It's a movie that puts to shame these movies that cost $200, $250, $300 million and look terrible. And this movie costs 15 and looks amazing. I really hope this film gets in for best visual effects. To me, the ending kind of spoiled the meal a bit, where it felt like we got this big victory and there's a moment earlier in the film that meant a lot, and they kind of undo that. But apart from that, I had a great time. First honorable mention, Godzilla Minus One. Next honorable mention is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I had a blast with this movie. This movie has actually grown with me as time has gone on. I think that it is a great conclusion to this trilogy. I certainly had some issues with the villains. I don't think that Adam Warlock was a very good villain at all. And while I like the main Rocket's the villain and the main villain, it kind of shows how forgettable he was. I can't even really remember his name. But apart from that, I loved this movie. I think that Chris Pratt gives a really emotional performance. I think that Rocket propels himself into the top 5 MCU characters with this film. The final scene in this movie is absolutely heartbreaking, and it is one of the best scenes of the year. Honorable mention number 2, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. My third honorable mention is The Flash. This is a movie that seems to be on most people's worst of the year. I'm telling you, you guys are nuts. This was a movie that I saw back at CinemaCon and loved it. Put my review out, and I was kind of shocked to see that it was very divisive. And so I wasn't able to see it in theaters with everyone else, and so I waited until months later, rewatched it, still love it. It didn't improve like I was hoping, but it stayed exactly where it was. I love the story with this film about Barry trying to figure out how to forgive and how to move on and how to let go. I love Michael Keaton coming back. I just loved the story about him losing everything, him losing his mom, him losing his dad. The CGI is terrible, I get that. That does hold it back, but I loved this movie. It's the movie that reminds me why I love comic book movies. My 12th favorite movie of the year was Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I thought this was going to make it into the cut for my favorite movies of the year, but apparently not. This is, I've said it before, on an objective level, a top 5 comic movie of all time. It is masterfully put together. It's masterfully directed. The score is incredible. The music is insane. The sound's great. The character development is interesting. It's got the best writing in a comic book movie since Logan, best character development in a comic book movie since Logan and Infinity War and Endgame. Problem is, it's part 1. We don't know when part 2 is coming out, so I can't put it in there. I won't call it one of the greatest comic book movies of all time until we get part 2. So I still had a great time, still loved the movie. Really hoped it could have been on this list, but it wasn't. So, number 12, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And my final honorable mention is Talk to Me. This is my favorite horror movie of the year, and that shows how rough this year was for horror. Directed by two YouTubers, Danny and Michael Filippo. They crafted an excellent supernatural horror film that brings a new style to the genre, this subgenre. It brings something that is different. It kind of takes the monkey's paw story and makes it more supernatural. I thought Sophie Wilde was great. She's going to be a star. And while I do like that this is a one and done, or could have been a one and done, I'm also really excited to see the success that this film had and the sequel that it's getting. I'm very interested. Final honorable mention, Talk to Me. At number 10 is one of the bigger surprises of the year, and that's Past Lives. Now, I already talked about this in my most surprising movies of the year, so I won't talk about it too long. This is a movie that got a lot of buzz out of Sundance, got a lot of awards contention immediately. I didn't really buy into it because it feels like movies that felt like one of those movies that was going to die out really quickly. And by June, it kept staying around, but I was still convinced that it was going to die out. But I had an off day in June after I got back from a trip. And so I decided, you know what? I'll go and watch this movie. And I absolutely loved it. I think Greta Lee, T.O.U., and John Majaro, but all need to be considered for Academy Award nominations, especially Greta Lee. She's incredible. I can't wait to see what she does later in her career. I think she's going to be in Star Wars Acolyte, so I'm super excited for that just because she's in it. Celine Song directs the shit out of this movie. This is her directorial debut. I loved the story in this film about like how do you mourn what you never had, or in these two, like they could have gone in a very templated way where John Majaro's character could have been just this asshole, but they actually make him a good guy. He's understanding. The script is my second or third favorite script of the year. I think it's brilliant. It definitely needs to be in contention for Best Picture and Best Original Screenplay. Number 10, Past Lives. Number 9 is a movie that snuck in here at the last minute, and that's Poor Things. I like Yorgos Lanthimos, but I don't love him. Killing of the Sacred Deer. I haven't finished The Lobster yet, but from what I've seen, I enjoy it, but it's a little too weird for me. Killing of a Sacred Deer, I respect the hell out of it. It's a masterfully directed film, but it's also a movie where it's very hard to watch. It's a dark movie. It's very depressing. I don't know when I'll rewatch it. And then I thought The Favorite was good, but nowhere near as great as I was hoping. And so I heard all the buzz about how this was a new classic and how it's one of the greatest movies of the 21st century. I wouldn't go quite that far, but it's a great movie. It's a very fun and enjoyable film. It's a very interesting coming of age story where it's about this woman who is like a full-grown woman, but she's got the mind of a child. I love just seeing her walk through life at this rapid rate where she's kind of just taken advantage of by multiple people, like Mark Ruffalo, who's great. And I just loved the story of this film, of her trying to find herself and what she's in this world for, not just be used and taken advantage of. Performances in this are great. The script has been probably my top 3 scripts of the year. It deserves, Emma Stone should win Best Actress in my opinion. There's one other person who we'll talk about who maybe could contend, but apart from that person, there's no one else. Mark Ruffalo is hilarious in this movie. I didn't love him as much as I was hoping, but he's still great. Willem Dafoe's great. The technical elements of the direction, the editing, the sound, not necessarily the sound, but like costume design and production design are all great. I love this movie. There were a couple moments that I thought it lagged a bit, like the whole horror house section. Like it felt like that went on a bit too long. Like I'm fine with having that in there, but it needed to be shorter. And it felt like the whole thing at the end with Christopher Abbott coming in, kind of abducting her at the end and taking her to his mansion, felt kind of tacked on. It didn't feel like it needed to be there. But apart from that, I loved this movie. It was great. Just should have been a little shorter. So number 9, Poor Things. At number 8 is The Holdovers. To me, this is a new Christmas classic. It was a film where I'd heard all the good buzz from like Telluride Film Festival. And so I was really excited for this film. I love Paul Giamatti, and I really like Alexander Payne's movies, and I was one of the few people that liked Downsizing. And to me, this is the funniest movie of the year, bar none. It is just an absolute riot from beginning to end. I was laughing the entire time. It's a movie that is so heartwarming while also being really dark at times. It's a comedy that it feels like we don't get these kinds of movies anymore, where it's a movie where you've got like all this heartwarming stuff while also just this very weighty, dark elements of the film, but they mix perfectly. All three of these actors should be considered for Oscars. Paul Giamatti was in my top 5 favorite performances of the year. I loved him in this movie. Divine Joy Randolph deserves to win Best Supporting Actress. Dominic Sessa deserves to get in for Best Supporting Actor. I adored the script. This was my favorite script of the year. I absolutely think that this should win Best Original Screenplay at the Academy Awards this year. I loved this movie. It's a new Christmas classic. This is a film like a couple others that I think could really move up. But ultimately, the thing that holds it back a bit is there's a section in the film where Divine Joy Randolph's character, who's the best character in the movie, best performance in the movie, she's going up against Paul Giamatti, so that's surprising, kind of goes off for a bit, and she has like her own, it feels like she has her own story in a section of the movie that is like 10, maybe 15 minutes. It feels like it's taken out. And so it doesn't like, it's not something that just takes away from the experience too much, but it's also a movie where her character's so infectious and her character's so great that I was kind of missing her in that section. I was like, when is she going to show back up? She does eventually show back up, but I would have liked her. It was very jarring how she was just gone for a lot of that section. But I loved this movie. New Christmas classic, number 8, The Holdovers. My 7th favorite movie of the year was Killers of the Flower Moon. I have a full review out for this film. But in short, I thought this movie was a masterfully put together film about our past nightmares and our past travesties that we caused as human beings. I thought that this movie actually merited the 3.5-hour runtime, where it's a movie that you just grow to hate these characters from the second you meet them, where it's this film where you just kind of watch horrible things happen to people for about 2.5 hours. And you just are waiting and waiting for someone to do the right thing. And eventually it happens when the police start showing up and the FBI start taking control of it. But this was one of the most captivating movies of the year, where I just couldn't take my eyes off the screen. It's 3.5 hours and I didn't leave the theater once. I barely ever felt bored. It's got some of the best performances in the year, with Lily Gladstone, who's the other person next to Emma Stone, who I think could take Best Actress. Leonardo DiCaprio, who's great as always. Robert De Niro, who gives one of his best performances in years, where he completely brings a new performance, where he brings a new accent, brings a new character, and that's very impressive that he's at his age and he's still bringing new characters in. He's great. I think everything on a technical level is great. And this is a film that as soon as you finish it, you want to go research it, you want to go look it up, you want to go see what actually happened. It's one of the most captivating and most interesting movies of the year. People say that it's too long. I don't get that, simply because I just don't know where you could take what you could take out. I certainly felt the runtime. I certainly felt, because it's a 3.5-hour movie and it's not Lord of the Rings, but I don't know, thinking about it more, I don't know where I could take certain elements out. I don't know where I could take out 10 minutes, 20 minutes, even 30 minutes. I genuinely have no idea. And that's my main thing, is like, you can definitely feel the runtime, and that's its main flaw, but it's still a pretty perfect movie. I don't say that lightly. The main thing was Lily Gladstone's character is the best character in the movie, and she's the best performance in the movie, and she leaves for about 25 minutes, and like very abruptly, and it just feels like she kind of like, we kind of just abandoned her for a bit, and then she shows up like for the end. But apart from that, I've had a great time with this movie. It's definitely, out of all my top 10, the movie that I rewatched least. Like, if you ask me which movie would you rewatch last, it would be this film, but I still had a great time with it, Killers of the Flower Moon. At number 6 was the biggest surprise of the year, and that's Saltburn. I already talked about this in my biggest surprises of the year. I loved this movie. I loved how crazy it was. I liked that it was a very interesting and wacky and weird as all shit interpretation on Fantastic Mr. Ripley. I loved Barry Keoghan in this movie. He is proving to be one of the better actors, up-and-coming actors. I absolutely adored Rosamund Pike in this movie. She's one of my favorite actresses working today. She deserves to be in that conversation for getting into some awards. Jacob Elordi was the big surprise in this movie for me, where I haven't really been too keen on Jacob Elordi, and he had a good year between, from what I've heard, Priscilla and this, where he's incredible in this, where he has that incredible just energy of like kind of like a gentle giant, where he's this incredibly attractive and well-built guy. He looks like he could probably rip you to shreds, and he could be very intimidating, but he's a very kind, heartwarming person where he's just trying to help kind of Barry Keoghan's character. And what I love about this film was that it just took you on this ride where it's kind of reinventing itself every 15 to 20 minutes, where it keeps asking new questions, it keeps answering them somewhat, but it answers them so that it's still up to interpretation. It keeps presenting new twists that just reshape your thinking of the previous few minutes. This was a film that my friend recommended to me, and he said he loved it, and I knew if he loved it, I was going to love it even more, and it's one of my favorite movies of the year. I think that this is one of the best scripts of the year. Emerald Fennell, once again, directs the shit out of this movie. She's one of the best directors working today. I love this movie. I understand why it's a little more divisive. It's got some stuff that it isn't going to work for everyone. But to me, I love the ride that this movie took me on, and this is certainly going to be one of the movies that I remember the most from 2023. And so I had to have it pretty high up, and so it comes in at number 6. At number 5 is John Wick Chapter 4. I have a full review out for this movie. On an objective level, this is one of the best movies of the year, and on an objective level, this is one of the greatest action movies ever made. It is so good. This movie gives a great conclusion to the character of John Wick, and I know they're talking about doing Chapter 5. We don't need it. Please stop. Where this film adds a lot of emotion to his character, where you really get to reflect on the damage that he's caused, of how he's this guy that has been fighting for so long, but by the end of the movie, you kind of realize, what has he been fighting for since Chapter 2, especially? Like, he was fighting for his puppy, of course, but what's he fighting for now? He's just kind of fighting to stay alive. And I loved all that, like, all those themes. The action in this movie is some of the best action of all time. It's literally changing the genre. We don't know how they did some of this stuff. Keanu Reeves is better than ever in this movie. It's a movie where it's got some of the best, like, one takes out there. It's talk about action back to back to back. It's a movie where you just have action from start to finish, like, where it just iconic action sequence after iconic action sequence after iconic action sequence. And it's truly nuts how well done that is, where it's almost 3 hours long and it never feels too long. This is a movie where I was shocked at how much I loved this movie. It is one of these movies where it just blew my mind at how great it was. It's my 5th favorite movie of the year. It was originally my 4th, but I changed it because I had to put one other movie a little bit higher. At number 4 is the most entertaining movie of the year, and that's Air. This movie was an absolute blast. This came out about 2 weeks after John Wick Chapter 4, and very quickly at the time replaced John Wick as my favorite movie of the year. This is one of the most interesting movies of the year because it shouldn't work. A movie about shoes shouldn't interest me, but it's one of the most interesting, captivating movies of the year, where you're glued to the screen the entire time, where it just tells this really interesting story about this underdog of Nike and Michael Jordan, which is insane to say because they're some of the biggest, like, properties, entities, whatever you want to call them, in modern history. Of Michael Jordan is one of the greatest athletes of our time. He's one of the most iconic athletes of all time. And Nike is the most successful shoe company in the world. And it shows how Michael Jordan kind of caused this. I think that is brilliantly written. It's so funny. This is next to The Holdovers is the funniest movie of the year. It's made me laugh my ass off the entire time. I absolutely loved Matt Damon's character and his relationship with Chris Messina. That's great. But I really liked how they told Michael Jordan's story kind of through his mother's eyes, and how they made the directorial choice to not show Michael Jordan. I thought that was really creative. Viola Davis is great. And the thing that I took away most from this is it's a movie where that you could show it to anyone. It's got tons of language, but apart from that, it's not that bad. And it's a movie where it's really is about just going for it. And sometimes you have to trust your gut and just say, fuck it. And go for it. And no matter what anyone else says, you just gotta go for it. And so I love this movie. Probably the most entertaining movie of the year. So it comes in at number 4. Side note, I say in the recording, this is my 5th favorite movie of the year. I bumped it up to my number 3. And so at number 3 is The Iron Claw. At number 5 is the movie on this list that could move up to my number 1. Give it a month or so, this movie could become my favorite movie of the year. And that's The Iron Claw. I'm not a wrestling fan. I'm not. I don't really give a shit. I don't know anything about wrestling. And so when I heard Zac Efron was going to be making a movie about one of the most famous wrestling families of all time, I was curious because I like Zac Efron and I like Jeremy Allen White. But I wasn't sure how much I was going to like it. And this is the most devastating movie of the year, more than Killers of the Flower Moon. But it's also one of the most emotionally fulfilling movies of the year as well. Where, if you don't know, it's about the Von Erich family, where you have this so-called curse that basically this family had, and it was a so-called curse that just kept, tragedy after tragedy kept happening to this family. And this film did such a fantastic job at explaining and showing what it means to be a family member and the love that comes with that and the devastation that comes with that, and how people that you love the most can also cause you the most amount of pain you could ever feel. Not necessarily their fault, but it's just what happens in life. I thought all the performances were great. Zac Efron, people who say he's not a good actor, watch The Iron Claw. You're fucking wrong, period. Jeremy Allen White is incredible. Holt McElhaney is outstanding. And throughout the movie, it has this really interesting change. Where at the beginning of the movie, you kind of side with Holt McElhaney's character of the father, where you realize that, he's a little hard on his kids, but you can kind of tell that he wants the best for them. And as the movie goes on, you grow to hate him to the point where at the end of the movie, Zac Efron almost kills him. And it really takes a lot for a movie to, when that moment gets there, to get me to go and not only feel what that person's feeling, but in some ways a little piece of me kind of not necessarily wanting, but maybe agreeing. And where there's a little piece of you that's saying, do it. He deserves it. And he's one of the most despicable characters of the year. This movie is, to me, a perfect movie. Out of all the movies this year, to me, this is easily a top 2 on an objective level. I adored this movie. It is an emotionally wrecking movie. And I don't like to say that very often because it's stuff that's overused. But the last scene or two, and really a lot of this movie, just left me devastated. And there's some certain lines that Zac Efron says at the end of the movie to his kids. And it is the most heartbreaking line delivery I've seen in years. And I'm getting a little emotional about it right now because I've always wanted a brother. I have a sister, and I love her to death, but I've always wanted a brother. And I can only imagine the pain that people would feel of losing their brother. And as I was watching this, I'm a runner. And so I was watching this movie and I was kind of realizing that this is how it feels to be an athlete. Of you have your highs and you have your lows, and even though you may not be brothers with blood, with your teammates, I think of myself as a brother to a lot of my teammates. And I was getting incredibly emotional just thinking about the repercussions in this movie. And so I'd love to put out a review for it, but I don't know if I'm going to have time. This is the most emotionally wrecking movie of the year. And I adored it. It's one of those movies where it's hard to talk about because it is just so devastating, but it's a movie where I think everyone should watch it because it's so meaningful to everyone. It's one of the best sports movies of all time, in my opinion. I adored this movie. Please go watch The Iron Claw. My runner-up for the best movie of the year is Oppenheimer. I'm going to get tons of shit in the comments. This is, I'll say it right now, on an objective level, the best movie of the year. On an objective level, I think it's one of the best movies of the 21st century. It is an incredibly important film. It's one of the films that stands out to me the most I'm going to remember from this year, simply because it's the movie that actually made me scared of the world. And where the final scene is an all-time great scene for me, because it's a scene that actually made me scared of thinking about at any moment the world could just end like that and there would be nothing I could do about it, and how helpless and hopeless we are in this world. I thought that it was masterfully put together by Christopher Nolan, where this is very clearly a Christopher Nolan movie and no one else could direct it as well as he did. Cillian Murphy gives the performance of a lifetime. He is my favorite performance of the year. He's my favorite performance of the year. I loved him. Robert Downey Jr. completely changes what we know of him for the last 10 years, 15 years from Iron Man, where he played Chaplin, and I feel like a lot of us forgot how great he was, and who knows, he might win. I don't think that he should, because I think Robert De Niro is a little bit better, but it's very possible that he wins Best Supporting Actor. Emily Blunt is great. There's been a lot of awards show talk about her. But I was really surprised with the technical level about how masterfully put together this was. That, like, the sound was incredible, where this is some of the best sound I've seen in a movie ever. I loved the makeup, how it was very subtle. The score, one of the best scores of the 21st century. This movie, on an objective level, is without a doubt the best movie of the year. I think it is going to absolutely clean up shop at the Academy Awards. I would not be surprised if this breaks the record for most wins. I genuinely wouldn't be. I don't think it will, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does. And so this is, on an objective level, is the best movie of the year, bar none. Nothing would come close. But if I am being honest, there is one, and I've seen this movie 4 times. I genuinely love it. I saw it 3 times in theaters. But if I'm being honest, there's one other movie that I enjoy a little bit more that I would rewatch probably before this one. So number 2, Oppenheimer. But my favorite movie of the year has been my favorite movie of the year since July, and that's Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. I don't know what to call it now, because we're not getting a Part 2 technically, because they're going to be changing the title, but whatever. I love this movie. This is my favorite action movie franchise of all time. Mission Impossible Fallout was my favorite movie of 2018. It's in my top 20 favorite movies of all time. And while this did not quite live up to that, it got pretty close. And not saying this is in my top 20. It's in my top 100 for sure. It might even be in my top 60 or top 50. I genuinely loved it. But what I loved about this movie so much was how well paced it was. Where this movie is nearly 3 hours long. It's 2 hours and 43 minutes. And it doesn't feel like that. To me, it felt like 2 hours. I could have been there for another 2 hours and 43 minutes. This movie flew by for me. I remember watching it in the theater for the first time, and when you get to the scene where There's the fight with Ilsa. It feels like you've been in the movie for only like 40 minutes. It genuinely does. When you get to the Rome fight, it feels like it's been the Rome chase. It feels like it's been 20 minutes. This was a movie that was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I was already projecting it as going to be one of my favorite movies of the year. It matched and blew away all my expectations. I've seen a lot of people not like the AI element. I love that element because to me it's actually somewhat realistic. And it feels like that could happen of someone who's really lost in like Gabriel would go to this AI that could promise him anything. I think that his character is fascinating. I'm really curious to see what really happened between Hunt and Gabriel because I think in the next one we're going to learn that maybe Hunt isn't as clean as we always thought he was. I loved the progression of the characters in this one. The action in this is great. One of the things I loved most about it was that while Ilsa is barely in the movie, it closes her arc out in a really special way where, for the last for Rogue Nation, Fallout, and now this, she's always been told run. She's always been told hide, don't get involved, just save yourself. And so she's always run. She's always ran from everything. She's always tried to get out of the way. She's always tried to get away from people. And in her way, that's to protect them. And I love the scene in this film where they're in Venice, and the fight with Gabriel's going on. Gabriel's about to kill Grace, and she stops and she makes the choice to go back and fight Gabriel, knowing full well she will probably die. And she puts up a hell of a fight, but Gabriel, spoiler alert, Gabriel kills her. And it's one of these moments where it's just so heartbreaking of like, you don't want either of these characters to die, but when you get to that bridge and he turns around and you see Ilsa, I remember my heart just dropping, being like, fuck, no, please don't kill her. But it's one of those good please don't kill her or moments because she's such a great character and they close her arc out in such a great way of she's been running all this time and she finally decides, no, I'm going to stand and I'm going to fight and I'm going to do what's right. And she loses her life, but she does it for the right cause. To me, this is a complete movie because it answers the questions that it was asking and it completes its story. The story it was asking was, all right, who's going to get the keys? And we figure out who gets the keys by the end of the film. The stunts in this film were incredible. It sets up the next one really well, where it could be a great conclusion in this franchise, or if they want to continue, it can keep going. Grace, Haley Atwell's character, is the new standout of the franchise. She's incredible. I loved her in this movie. So, to me, this was my favorite movie of the year. I cannot wait for part 2, and so it comes in at number 1. Well, those are my top 10 favorite movies of the year. Please let me know your favorite movies of the year down below in the comments. And as always, I'll see you on the other side. Bye.